Welcome all of you to the webinar today. This is Doyoung Lee, team leader of HR solution team at Gulfland Korea. Now we are in a pandemic situation all over the world, and training and education are facing challenges. Now is the time to gather our wisdom and pursue cooperation. So we Gulfland prepared today's webinar for the next topic. I will present and let's welcome today's speaker, our President John Ambrose. Please welcome.
Thank you very much, Doyoung, and welcome everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I've been asked to talk about marketing tactics to gain and sustain learner engagement. This is a topic that's very dear to my heart. I'm very passionate about it. Even though I have other responsibilities today, I started my career in marketing. So I feel that it's a very essential part of what we have to do as learning organizations. I spent many years at SkillSoft, which is a global e-learning company. I was the chief strategy officer at SkillSoft. And before that, started a company in the United States called Books 24/7. It was a company that SkillSoft acquired in 2001. And throughout my career at Books and at SkillSoft, marketing was something that I was always very close to. So what we want to do today is talk a little bit about these marketing tactics and how you can drive learner engagements. As I mentioned, it's one of the most challenging responsibilities of learning organizations. I will say at the beginning here that there is no magic formula, but there are some techniques that are very useful, and hopefully we can share them with you today, and they will be helpful to you as you think about your own programs. I am joined by some colleagues on the line today who will be speaking a little bit later in the session. Doyoung Lee, who you heard, who's our account executive in our Korea office. We'll have some stories to share later in the session. Also joining us in Tokyo, Japan is Takashi Ono, who is our country manager for Japan. And last but not least, our country manager in Shanghai, China, Daisy Huang, who is with us as well. And they all work very closely with clients in their countries and have some amazing stories to share, some great experiences. So we'll be chatting with them a little bit later in the session today. Now, before I get into the current state of learner engagement, let me just share the sequence that we'll go through. I plan to spend a little time talking about the current state of learner engagement, and then we'll talk about marketing and how to think like a marketer, which I believe is a very important skill set for any learning organization. We'll also dive into some specific steps that you can take with a marketing hat on to drive engagement in your learning program. And last but not least, we'll touch on some case studies along the way as well. And we'll finish with some Q&A. And of course, we have chat. So if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to use the chat or questions. You can send questions in the question box, and I'll try to address as many of them as possible at the end of our session. Now, as we dig into this session here, I will say that there is a great paradox of learning. And the great paradox of learning is that organizations spend so much time and so much money evaluating content, building learning programs, acquiring content, loading it into LMSs sometimes, deploying it to their audiences, but they spend relatively little time marketing. And so as we talk about learner engagements and the state of learner engagements, it is important that we, having trouble here advancing my slide. Give me 1 second. Let's see what's going on here. Use this. It is important that we think about what learner engagement is. So learner engagement is a measure that reflects not just the quantity of participation, but also the quality of participation in training programs. It's not just showing up. You know, in a physical classroom, you can show up in a physical classroom, but your mind can be somewhere else. The good thing about e-learning is that we have tools, we have techniques, we have ways of engaging the learner, which can ensure that you're not a passive learner. But when we think about learner engagement, we really have to be thinking about not just consumption, but the quality of the engagement. Now, why is this so important? Well, if you think about learners who invest in their development and do self-development in organizations, what its recent study by LinkedIn Learning found is that learners who invest in themselves are 74% more likely to know where they want to go in their career. 74%. They're 48% more likely to have found purpose in their work. They have a mission. They know what they want to accomplish. They are engaged. They're passionate. And 47% of learners are less likely to be stressed at work. Now, the interesting thing about these statistics is that LinkedIn Learning found that if you spend 5 hours or more a week, you had these benefits. 5 hours more or more learning a week. That's a lot of learning. If you do the math, 5 hours a week, it's 250 hours a year. That, in my book, is a super learner. I don't think most people are super learners. But the very interesting thing about the LinkedIn survey is that it found if learners spend only 1 hour per week, just 1 hour, they can get the same benefits that the super learners were getting. So they could be more likely to know where they want to go in their career, more likely to have found purpose in their work, and less likely to be stressed. So it's a good thing that we focus on learner engagement. We want learners to become lifelong learners. We want them to invest in their careers. We want them to be engaged. It also reminds me that there was a recent survey from Brandon Hall Research here in the US, and they said that 43% of learning professionals, these are global learning managers and CLOs and learning directors, 43% of them who were surveyed cited lack of learner engagement as a key challenge to achieving critical learning outcomes. So we know from the research that driving learner engagement is very, very important. So marketing can make a big impact. We know, according to survey data, that driving learner engagement is the #1 trend that will impact successful learning programs in 2020. And marketing has the opportunity to really drive this user engagement and drive adoption. You know, we have a saying in the US that was particularly used back in the .com days, and it was a philosophy that if you build it, they will come. And so many times over the years at SkillSoft, I heard learning professionals talk about how they mistakenly thought if they built this big learning program, people would just come in big numbers and just want to absorb it, want to use it, but it doesn't work like that. Learning really is a business process. It needs to be managed like a business process. So marketing is absolutely key to making sure that we're not just building great programs, but we're letting our organizations know about them and really getting them excited driving engagement and usage and adoption. So I want to talk a little bit about thinking like a marketer and what that means. It is important that as learning professionals, we spend so much time on the content and the structure and the pedagogy and the objectives of our learning, but it's very important that we also treat learners like a customer. And this is what marketers do, right? Marketers figure out how to connect a customer with a product. And as learning professionals, it's really our job to think like a marketer and make that connection happen. You know, we have there's a very famous merchandiser in the US. He had a very famous department store in the US. This is back in 100 years ago when merchandising was just becoming a big business. His name was John Wanamaker. And he had a saying, because he believed in marketing, but wasn't sure how effective it was. And he used to say that 50% of my marketing is working. I just don't know what 50%, because there were really no tools, sophisticated tools to help have feedback and data on how marketing, how advertising was happening 100 years ago. You put ads in newspapers and you waited for customers to show up. And if you think about the evolution of marketing, you know, we've gone from mass marketing to segmented marketing to targeted marketing, where we're using very sophisticated predictive tools, to customer-driven communications, to interactive conversations. We've got many, many online tools today in the marketing arsenal of your marketing department. And as learning professionals, it's really a great opportunity for us to think about how to take some of those same processes, same techniques, and apply them to L&D. So what's our role? What's the role of marketing in learning and development? And I think it really has three key purposes. One is to break through the noise to increase adoption. I remember Josh Bersin and Deloitte published a very important study on the future of work 4 or 5 years ago. And one of the concepts in this study was the concept of the overwhelmed employee. And they had determined through their research that employees were getting bombarded with messaging from so many different places, from email, from collaboration tools, from virtual meetings and texts and IMs and phone calls. It was very difficult for an employee to focus, and it makes it very difficult for us in learning and development to get our messages to these overwhelmed employees. You know, in that same study, I remember they talked about attention spans of humans, that in the year 2000, the average human had an attention span of 12 seconds. And in 2020, the attention span is now down to 8 seconds. But the bad news is the attention span of a goldfish is 9 seconds. So humans have a shorter attention span now than goldfish. So it makes our job challenging to break through the noise. There's a lot competing for the mind share of your employees. Secondly, we need to establish a sense of urgency and purpose for the learning. You know, and here I say, what's in it for the learner? Put your marketing cap on from an L&D perspective, and let's think about why the learner should want to engage in the learning program that we're launching. What's in it for them? How do we make it appealing and attractive and meaningful to them? And then third, sustain engagement with relevant and regular attention-grabbing marketing. And here I say, think about marketing as a process, not as a single event. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, but you know, it is important that, you know, when you're putting a lot of investment and a lot of effort into launching a new learning program, that a single message, you know, a single email or a single social message up front is probably not enough. You really need to sustain engagements, and you need to have a series of messages. Think of it as a campaign, just like any marketing campaign. So Wow, we have over 100 attendees on the session right now, so thank you all, 102 actually joining us. So I just want to take a moment to thank you all again this morning. At this stage, I want to invite a little participation from all of you who are joining us here. I've prepared a short little poll. Let me see if I can launch this on screen. Okay. So the poll is, what do you do to capture the attention of your learners today? And see, I don't know if you're seeing it. Okay, you're seeing that poll now. Yep, the results are coming in. I see events. Some of you are doing events, quite a large number there. Email campaigns are big. So events and email campaigns seem to be some of the leading techniques that you're using today. Intranet promotions, also quite strong. Physical posters and other, seeing some others there as well. Thank you for voting. The votes are still coming in. Yep, so it's interesting. So we finished here at about 67% of you are using events, and that could include kickoffs or lunch and learns. 63% using email campaigns. We'll talk a little bit more about email. 48% using intranet promotion, and 26% using physical posters, 5% using some other types of techniques. So yeah, we can see some very good diversity of techniques, and I'm not totally surprised that email was high on the list, but I'm a little surprised that it was number 2 to events. So good for all of you for using events to drive your learning programs. Okay, so I want to take the next few moments to just talk about marketing tactics to gain and sustain learner engagements. And we'll talk about some specific tactics here. And you know, the first one is attract learners to your program by understanding their needs. And again, we really need to think like a marketer, and marketers always start with the audience in mind. Marketers develop a marketing plan. They think about, you know, who their target learners are and what their responsibilities are. Think about the skill sets and experience levels that they have. That's that, you know, for the target audience that you're trying to reach. You know, what are their day-to-days like? You know, how do you make the messaging pop? How do you make it relevant? How do you make it speak to them? And I would say that one of the things to focus on is really communicate benefits over features, right? Tapping into a user or a learner, a target for your learning program, communicate the benefits, because that's what will get them excited. I know some companies take this a step further. They actually they build learner profiles. You know, what is the job title of the person? What's their area of expertise? What's their area of interest? What previous positions did they have? Hobbies, and so forth. And sometimes these can be built in a modern platform like an LXP, like a Degreed or a Cornerstone or a SkillSoft LMS. Sometimes they can be built in a platform like the GoFluent platform, which has a needs and goals front end where we can collect this information and can help you target the right content to the right learner at the right time. So start with the learner in mind, think like a marketer. And I know, Daisy, I think hopefully you're on the line there, and I think you've got an example of a customer that you've been working with in China, and some of the things they did to attract learners to their program. Would you mind sharing it a little bit?
Hello. Yes, thank you,
Hello.
John. Hi, everyone. Hi, welcome to join this webinar. So, first of all, I'd like to say it is true. to identify what matters learners is very critical. Here in China, our team are supporting clients manage a program based on corporate initiative and business drive. But more importantly, we design a program based on a deep understanding of learners' professional and also personal needs. So yes, we apply some social network tools in China, like WeChat, which is so common. So we create group-based program-based WeChat group and use social network and also survey tools like SurveyMonkey and some local tools like 问卷星, we call it 问卷星, or Tencent Survey. Those tools are compatible with WeChat, so we can enable high effective online survey to get a real live feedback. I can share with you an example. Actually, last year we ran a project with a local leading airline company called China Eastern Airline. So the question list was a joint work between Gopher project team and client internal program team. We used 问卷星 to deploy the survey. Besides collect feedback from learner and their manager to analyze their current challenges and to analyze the skill gap, we design questions, try to estimate possible engagement behavior by ask learners questions like, what is language program priority per their point of view, and like how often do they need to use English to do their job, how much time could they invest for the program per week, and also like what are specific possible time slots they could arrange for the program, and etc. We've also tried to understand better about learners' personal preference. If they tend to be more engaged for self-study e-learning program, which they could use more of their spare time, or they prefer to have more human interaction, to communicate with their coach, to communicate with learners from the other companies. So based on collect and analysis feedback from client program team and also from learner themselves, we could propose a well-designed project, and we could recommend a deployment plan to drive learners to be more engaged for those kind of projects. So John, that is my story.
Great, that's awesome. And I'm curious, Daisy, when they offered the learners a choice of having the human interaction, was that a very popular choice for users?
I think so.
Yeah.
Although e-learning is the trend, the mobile learning is very popular, but to convert what they learn through self-study to real business situation, they really can enjoy great benefit by interact with real trainers, with real classmates from their own team or from other companies.
Great. And WeChat seems to be the tool of choice in China these days, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very good. Good. Thank you for sharing that with us, Daisy.
Thank you, John.
So the second technique revolves around leveraging internal influencers. And this is also very important. And we've seen this technique work time and time again in many, many different companies. It's what I would call the reference sale, right? It's reaching out to a senior executive. A senior executive can be so powerful to launching a new program or relaunching a very critical program that's aligned with specific business objectives, especially when they're objectives that were set from the top And you want to get strong alignments and strong engagements, strong endorsements. This could be done through video message. I've seen some very, very cool video messaging from senior executives. Could be just a letter that's on your intranets, written by the senior executive. But really think about how to leverage those senior executives as promoters, if you will, for your program. And it brings to mind during the COVID lockdown that we're going through now in Europe and North America. We had a customer in France, a large pharma company. The CEO challenged his employees to achieve 1 million hours of remote virtual learning during the lockdown period. 1 million hours collectively. So this is an organization with 100,000 plus employees. But when the CEO comes out and says, we can do this, I challenge the organization to self-learn, to take advantage of this time, to invest in yourself. And we have these great programs, really can drive incredible levels of engagement. And think about that, 1 million hours of learning engagement is really, really special. So don't underestimate the power of influencers, especially senior executives. Now, another influencer that's very important in this process is the manager. We know from research that 75% of employees take courses recommended by their manager. So the manager can be very influential in the process. They know the skill sets of their employees. They know their strengths, where they can use improvement. And if you can engage managers to recommend courses or programs, you're going to have very high engagements. And third, user testimonials. People who have either gone through the program or early adopters or subject matter experts in the organization that you can tap into. I think that when you engage with them, it's also great not just to have their influence to say, hey, this is a good program, but to have them talk about how the program helped them in their role, right? Or what benefits they achieved from using this program or an earlier version of this program or a similar program to it. Another thing that you can ask them is, what ways did they apply the learning, to be in their jobs to be more successful? So really using that peer pressure, the peer endorsement as a tool. So the peers, the managers, the senior executives all have tremendous influence. And I can remember at SkillSoft for a period of time, we tried giving monetary bonuses to people. It was a small amount of money, the equivalent of maybe a gift card, like a Starbucks gift card. But still, if you completed a certain number of course hours each quarter, you would get one of these small bonuses. It worked, but it wasn't great. But our chief operating officer started using the products and started talking about the products in his meetings. And suddenly, the more people saw a senior executive actually talking about the programs and using them personally, the more influence it had, because everybody emulates and is wondering, what are the secrets to become successful and how do I become more like that person? So they are more inclined to want to follow in their footsteps. So lots of great techniques here for using internal influencers. And Du-Young, I think you had some experiences with one of your clients, I think it was Bayer, on the power of influence.
Yeah, thank you for letting me sharing this case with Bayer Korea. Actually, Bayer Korea had been conducting language programs with local language providers for 5 years until last year. Meanwhile, in line with Bayer HQ headquarters digital transformation policy, talent management team faced the challenge of changing all education and personal practices digitally. In the process, they will take on a new challenge with GoFluent, which digitally is conducting language training programs with Bayer France. Changing the provider led them to face two challenges. The first was to spread word of mouth to learners about the excellence of this new training program. In-house, in-house learners always have a repulsion for new changes.
Yeah.
For making this influence, we conducted a pilot program in advance and received good feedback from excellent learners from each department and used it to introduce new courses in the company newsletter. As a result, the number of pre-applications increased to 200% compared to the same period than last year with a local provider. At the same time, the second task had to be solved, which was an efficient guide for their learners to adapt to the new process all easier. Fortunately, they had a 2-week additional application period, and we held 2 kickoff meetings using a large-scale Skype webinar session for primary applicants. What was interesting was that the number of additional applicants increased by 20% after the kickoff meeting. In other words, the efforts of the HRD department, which spread its internal influence in various ways, have increased their trust in education. And currently, this global business communication course has a very explosive learning completion rate. It is also the only stable language course in the pandemic situation. I would like to take this opportunity today to honor Korea HRD's dedication to the introduction of GoFluent. Thank you.
That's terrific. Thank you, De-Yong. When the pilot program was conducted, how long was the pilot and how many people were involved in that? Do you remember?
Yeah, five learners in each department. They are excellent learners in their organizations. They are recruited by HRDers in 2 weeks.
Okay. So a very controlled pilot with selected learners in different departments. Sounds like an excellent approach, and a 200% increase is phenomenal. That's incredible. So fantastic. Great job with at Bayer.
Yes, right.
Thank you, De-Yong. So the third technique is something that we saw come through pretty strongly in the poll that we conducted a few minutes ago, and that is staying top of mind with electronic messaging, right? Mostly emails or other types of social messaging. But the idea here is to stay top of mind, right? To think in terms of program, in terms of campaign, and to drive a series of messaging. And one of the techniques that I've heard other learning professionals, other learning managers describe is the idea that you don't want to just deliver the same message over and over, but you want to be creative and you want to tease a little bit, reveal a little bit with each new message so that the campaign starts to build one message after another, and you create excitement, you create anticipation around the program. Some other tips around this type of messaging are to keep it short. Our marketing professionals at GoFluent, constantly remind me to be concise. Just keep it short. That attention span. Remember, our attention span is less than the goldfish. So keep the subject line short and descriptive. Their recommendation is 41 characters, 7 words work best. Keep the email body very focused and concise. And don't forget to include some call to action in your messaging. Maybe it's a call to action to book a lesson or register for a workshop or start learning now. But always, every message should have a call to action built into it. And again, think in terms of campaigns. Also, we'll share with you that in the LinkedIn research that I was reviewing, They claim that 61% of employees discover learning programs via email marketing. 61% through email marketing. So it's and that actually was very close to the statistic that we had in our poll here. I think 65% of you said you were using email marketing. So email is obviously still a very powerful tool, not the only tool, as we know, but it is a powerful tool. But please don't think of it as just one-off, as a single email, but think of it as a campaign, and approach it with that marketing mentality. So number 4, in terms of techniques, is using multi-channel communication to maximize your reach. And here, you know, we've got a couple of illustrations here of different types of tools to communicate your programs. So if depending on your workplace, your work environment, displaying creative posters in common areas can work real well. To think about a combination of online and offline marketing. You know, I've seen posters everywhere. I've seen companies do posters in meeting rooms. I've seen them do them in the pantry, the kitchen, the cafeteria, next to the water fountain, the water cooler. I've even seen, this is a true story, I've even seen posters in bathrooms. Now, I don't know how effective they were, but I've seen them. But the idea here is thinking that we're dealing with this overwhelmed learner, this overwhelmed user, and how can you get your message to them? Sometimes in unexpected ways. So think about those techniques of using offline and online. The second is using events, and very pleased to see that in our poll, events came out at the top of the list here. Many of you are already using them, and I think you see the power of events, whether they're virtual events or lunch and learns or vendor days where you've got your key partners in there demoing, but make them fun, make them exciting, and really leverage the power of events to create momentum and excitement around a new program or a new launch of a course or product. And finally, harnessing the power of social media. You know, as Daisy talked about earlier, you know, WeChat is such a big tool in China, but whether you're using WeChats or Twitter or Instagram, Line, Kakao Story, Facebook, whatever tools, think about how to creatively leverage them as part of your marketing campaigns as well. Take that multi-channel approach. I know some companies will create, even though these tools are, you know, say public, they're open to the public, a tool like a Twitter or LinkedIn. I know that some organizations will create a dedicated account for their learning organization and invite employees or target learners for specific programs and invite them in to the private group. You know, and you know, from there you can do things like program announcements, you can do reminders for programs that are coming up, you can even run trivia programs or fun posts to engage learners. So get crazy, get fun. I've seen companies create little buttons. Millennials love buttons that you can pin on your jacket or your shoulder bag. And I've seen them create buttons with sayings or with names of new programs that are being launched and encourage employees to wear them around the office. So many different things that can be used here. And finally, the number 5 is sustain engagement with competitions and incentives, right? Reward great behaviors. You know, and from a behavior standpoint, you might want to focus on things like, you know, who are the top learners, you know, top hours consumed, so the learners with the best learning progress. Maybe collect nominations from managers for the greatest behavior change, you know, employees who have gone through the program and applied the learning and maybe got promoted or just doing a phenomenal job in your organization. You know, you can target winners in competitions who apply the learning and really demonstrate the power of the learning program. And the rewards don't have to be very expensive or very elaborate. Many times just recognizing people in marketing channels is most important. People love recognition. They love to be seen as special among their peers. You can reward them with higher value learning opportunities. I remember many years ago, one of the big consulting firms that I was working with was doing a Six Sigma program. Six Sigma training is very, very expensive, and to become a green belt or a black belt requires very serious and expensive investment on the part of the company. And what they did is while they couldn't afford to send everybody to black belt or green belt training, they created a baseline program that was e-learning based and opened it up to employees and encouraged every employee to go take the e-learning courses in Six Sigma. And then those employees who did real well in those courses were rewarded with the opportunity to then move on and take a green belt or a black belt, depending on their roles, as an incentive, as a reward. But it also was a way to identify who are the most engaged learners, who are really motivated, who are really incentivized, personally incentivized to want to learn that topic. So think about creating a scaffold or a tiering of your learning offerings and offering higher value opportunities for the learners who achieve in terms of the baseline program. And we see this a lot in language learning as well, where companies will make e-learning available for language learning. And for those employees who are consuming a lot of the e-learning, who are very serious about improving their skills in speaking English or French or German or Spanish or Mandarin, you reward them with maybe some one-on-one coaching or some e-writing lessons, some very personalized additional opportunities to improve and accelerate their language skills. Team lunches, another great opportunity. Overnight experience seminar, gift cards, many different techniques that we've seen in different companies. And I think, Taka, you've got some great customer stories from Japan in this regard, right? For using incentives and competitions to drive engagements.
Yes, hello. Hello, everyone. This is Taka.
Hi, Taka. Hi, Taka.
I'm a general manager of GoFlint Japan. And yeah, I'd like to introduce some cases that I did with clients in Japan. Yeah, actually, I did several or many events before, but then today I want to talk about two projects that I did. So one is the project that we did with Salesforce Japan, Salesforce.com Japan. So GoFlint provides e-learning access to all employees of Salesforce Japan. And the challenge is to, of course, the more engagement, more usage, more study. So in order to promote more study engagement, we co-organized an English study challenge. So learners as individual and as a team, they competed study hours during 1 month, and the best, most, engaging in the individual and the group got some nice prizes, and this helped increase the number of learners and usage a lot. And another case I want to introduce is a project with a Yokohama-based electric parts maker. And we had 45 blended learners. And it was actually, we did it in last October to early this year. So for this training, we blended online study and offline on-site group activities. At the beginning of the training, we organized a kickoff event where all learners gathered in a large conference room. Then we split the 45 learners into 9 teams and had them group work and discussion. So in the kickoff event, they were informed that they would make a group presentation at the end of the entire training course. So they discussed at the kickoff. They discussed, what to present, who does that, what research, research is. So after the event, they go back to work and study, individual study. So during the several months of training course, they take live telephone lessons and e-learning individually while they work on presentation by communicating via emails or lines like WeChat or KakaoTalk. So at last, we had a presentation competition event, and we invited all learners and many HR people and some directors, some corporate officers as judges. So the main theme of the presentation was to promote their hometown. Each team presented the hometown of one of the team members as if they are the ambassador of the town for PR to invite more tourists. So after all presentations, everyone, including presenters, had voted to the most interesting town to visit. And the event was a big success. And the award for the best presenting team was a ticket for an English cooking class. So it means, it was not the end of the English study, but the study must go on. So the winning team members gathered again and enjoy cooking in English. And that's all from me. Thank you.
That's a fantastic story. I love the fact that they used the English cooking class as an incentive. It's very creative. It's incredible. And probably tasty too, huh?
Yeah, I guess. Yes, an interesting, I think, taste. And actually, the idea of the award was not from GoFluent, but their HR, my HR contact, HR manager, came up with this idea. So, the important thing is to, think, discuss, and organize together by the GoFluent and our client together.
Yeah. And I could imagine that, if, that everyone would work hard to want to win, and the group that won, what a great experience to have the English cooking class and to continue the learning, right? To really put it into practice. And I would imagine in a cooking environment, you're more relaxed, you have more confidence when you speak, you have a little drink to go with it, everybody's feeling good, and it really is a really neat way to put the learning into action.
Absolutely.
Very cool, very cool. And one other question, Taka, on Salesforce Japan, didn't we win an award with that program? Wasn't that, did they just win an award for that?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Yes, actually, yeah, in 2019, 18, yeah, by this kind of project, or by our core collaboration with Salesforce, we won a Blandon Hall Award for the best unique or innovative e-learning use. So yeah, indeed.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing those incentives and competitions. They're great examples, and I really appreciate sharing them with everyone here. So just to summarize, the 5 tactics that we talked about to gain and sustain learner engagements: attract learners to your program, understand their needs, start with the audience in mind. Number 2, make the case for learning by leveraging those internal influencers, the bosses, the managers, the executives, the peers. Number 3, stay top of mind. Use email, use electronic communication to span the learner journey, right? Tease a little bit, reveal a little bit each time, build up the excitement. 4, use the multi-channel approach, right? So many great tools out there that we're using in our consumer lives. Think about applying them, as Daisy talked about, with WeChat and other tools to reach your audience, to engage your audience. And finally, sustain the engagement with competitions, with incentives. Maybe it's a cooking class or some other creative endeavor to reward, but also to reinforce the point of the learning program. So I'm going to ask if any of those who are out there, if you have some marketing efforts of your own that were effective in engaging learners that you want to share in the chat session, and we can try to take a look at those. Anybody wants to share them? And in the meantime, as we're coming up at the top of the hour, I'll keep an eye on that. Any specific examples that you want to share? I'm also going to double that with questions and answers. So if anybody has questions here, so we're coming up to the top of the hour, and I see one pop in already, which is usually the first question I get in almost every webinar, which is the presentation available afterwards? Yes, we will make a copy of the presentation available. We'll send it out by email after the session within the next day or so. So certainly by Monday, you'll have that in your email box, and you'll have a link to the GoToMeeting and a copy of the presentation. Let's see what else is coming through on the questions. Okay, I see another question here. We have a small training team. Can suppliers like GoFluent help us with marketing? Absolutely, absolutely. We pride ourselves on being a partner with you as a customer to share the best practices. Obviously, we're working with thousands of companies around the world on programs, various programs. So we see a lot of techniques, a lot of practices, some of just a few you heard today. We also have an entire team, we call it our learner engagement team, which is designed to help support customers in the rollout and launch and the ongoing engagement of their learners. So there's a lot we can do, a lot of tools that we have, technologies, techniques, messaging that can be very useful to you in the rollout of your programs. It could be the rollout of just your first launch of a language program. I remember we recently worked with a large customer in the US, a large technology company that was embracing languages with our enterprise license. So they were licensing our e-learning portal for every employee in the company. And it's something like 200,000 employees. And they wanted to make a big launch, a big visible launch. So they took the approach of creating something called the Global Language Academy and making it a brand and building up a whole campaign around the launch of this Global Learning Academy, because they really wanted to drive the message to all employees that everyone now has the ability, the access to develop their own language skills in every language that GoFluent offers. So 7 different languages. So our engagement team can help with those types of opportunities, whether it's a big launch, a small launch, sharing techniques, sharing tools. Absolutely happy to help with that. Okay, looking at some more questions coming in here. I got another question here, and maybe this will be the last one for today. Do marketing techniques vary based on country? Well, I would say that marketing techniques certainly vary company to company, and certainly between industries. Some industries are very technology savvy, and their workforces are very technology literate. Other industries are more human oriented, maybe like a retail industry, which is more people industry, etc. So it really does vary more company to company and industry to industry. However, having said that, as demonstrated here, we've got some countries here who are very early adopters and strong adopters of digital technologies, and are far more effective at using things like social media, social messaging, WeChat, other techniques to connect and engage their learners. And I think if you look at the globe, certain parts of the world, Europe and Latin America, some other parts of the world, Africa, there's still a lot of offline components. So we see more posters, more brown bag lunches, more offline techniques. In Asia, clearly seeing a lot of digital techniques to engage and inspire employees. In the US, we see a mix, hybrid of, again, depending on industries and companies. But there is some variation, but I would say, in my experience, it's more along the lines of companies and industries more than geographies. So with that, I just want to wrap up by saying that we appreciate your time this morning. We know your time is important and very valuable. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for the questions. I think there may be a few more coming in here that we'll answer in the follow-up. But we're here, GoFluent, as a company that's is here to help you in your learning journey as it pertains to language learning. So please let us know how we can help you from a marketing perspective to put any of these techniques into practice and to help you have great, successful, highly engaged learning programs, because that's what we're all after. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you for joining. We'll talk to you again in a future session. Bye-bye now.